Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 49th episode of 2024. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Five for Breakfast. Today I'm down here in Texas speaking at MDOC's Leadership Summit with the CIO of Comcast and Verizon's Chief Product Officer and other industry leaders. And last night, I spent the night poring over all the materials from AT&T's Analyst Day yesterday, and wow, AT&T is hitting out of the park. John Stankey and his team outlined AT&T's plan to get fiber to 50 million homes and businesses. That's 50 million with an M over the next 5 years. AT&T's massive capex investment in fiber is driven by a 35% reduction in OpEx, material increase in ARPU. It drives their gross margin to 40%, although every analyst I saw believes that they'll get to about 50% gross margin. It drives the bundling of other AT&T products such as mobile wireless and postpaid phone services. It speeds deployment and lowers deployment costs for self-installs. I also love Mr. Stankey's quote where he says that the next CEO of AT&T should send him a fruit basket every year for Christmas because they're going to be sitting on some of the most pristine infrastructure in the industry, and it's just going to print money. So clearly the private sector understands the fiber preference as it's good business and will elevate the quality of life for generations to come. Next week, we're going to be in Florida for the Fiber Broadband Association's premier member meeting, where we're going to be discussing and setting our strategy for 2025. This is my favorite meeting of the year. It's great to see our top members. And as we enter 2025, we're going to work our way around North America with an amazing lineup of regional Fiber Connect workshops. We'll be in San Antonio in February for Texas's $3.3 billion. We'll be in Philly in March. Fiber Day in the Hill will be in April. Our Granddaddy Fiber Connect 2025 will be in Nashville, June 1st to 4th. Then we'll be up in Anchorage, in September, in October, Kansas City in November, and then we'll have our premier member meeting in Palm Springs in December. So it's quite a great lineup for next year. That brings us to today's Five for Breakfast session. Our guests today are our good friends Mike Bell, Senior Vice President, General Manager, and Bob Whitman, Marketing Vice President for Corning Optical Communications, for a very special session, Reflections from 33 Years in Industry and What's Next, a conversation with Corning Mike Bell. Before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary. Good morning to everyone who's joined us today. We appreciate it. Before we go over a few logistics, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, if you would all please keep in mind, you are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located within the control panel on the upper right of your screen. We will host a Q&A session at the end of today's discussion. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours, and you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. It's only one question, but it really helps us out, so please take a moment to complete that survey. We appreciate the input. And with that, I will pass things back over to Gary to once again get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Five for Breakfast, our guest was Catherine DeWitt at Pew Charitable Trust, who really shared Pew's latest efforts on making sense of dollars spent on digital equity. Catherine and her team at Pew do an amazing job in research and driving digital opportunities across our nation as we work to connect every American with fiber. If you missed that last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guests are our good friends, Mike Bell, the Senior Vice President and General Manager, and Bob Whitman, the Marketing Vice President for Corning's Optical Communications, for a very special session, Reflections from 33 Years in Industry and What's Next, a conversation with Corning's Mike Bell. Mike has a remarkable career in industry, culminating in his leadership of the largest global fiber manufacturer. As he prepares to retire as the head of Corning Optical Communications, Bell sits down with a fireside chat with our colleague Bob Whitman, touching on the key turning points Bell has seen in his 33 years in industry, the most critical opportunities and challenges in the market, and where fiber goes from here. He also unpacks some of the leadership traits for the success in such a growing and cynical business, and now how his time as a submarine warfare officer in the U.S. Navy leader. Bob is responsible for global network market and business development, including strategy and execution of Corning's fiber to the home, inside plant, 5G, emerging application initiatives. Over 27 years experience in optical fiber network architecture, product development, and carrier engagement in various technical and commercial roles. Focused in areas include industry engagement, addressing service provider challenges, solution development, and government affairs collaboration. Prior to Corning, Bob served as a nuclear power engineering officer in the U.S. Navy. So we have two Navy guys here. So thank you guys for your service. Also, Bob is a founding member of the Fiber Broadband Association and has served on the FBA board and continues to be highly involved in FBA's success. So thank you for that, Bob. So welcome, Mike and Bob, and for our audience, please type in your questions to go, and we'll work those into discussion. With that, I will turn it over to Mike and Bob to get things rolling.
Super. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. And for our listeners, just for your awareness, we're going to talk about the industry past, present, and future over Mike's career, and we'll hit some of the major events and turning points. Mike, a very sincere thank you to you for your incredible contributions to Corning and for your service to our country. In 33 years in the optical fiber business, you've seen the ups and downs. I can attest you've been a steady hand at the helm. What principles have guided you as a leader during your career, and how did your military experience shape your leadership journey?
Well, Bob, thanks for the question. As you know, as a former member of the U.S. Navy, we were both trained to be collaborative leaders. Especially in the submarine service, officers only really earn respect by how they treat others. And they can't just demand it. Something that, you may not know about submarine services, you have a rank, of course, you come in as lieutenant, and all the enlisted folks call you Lieutenant Bell until you earn the respect. Then they call you Mr. Bell. And so that element of collaboration and earning respect by treating people the way they'd like to be treated is an element that I learned in the military. And it was creating a culture where everyone could reach their fullest potential and feel dignity and respect. We're trained to deal with intense life-threatening situations, like when you're in a big tube, fire, flooding, and all types of nuclear reactor scenarios. Even its ups and downs, and nothing compares with that kind of intensity. So part of our training was remain calm in the face of chaos. And so I think that's what I've been able to do during these ups and downs in the industry.
That's great. So now let's talk about chaos under fire, right? So one of the most tumultuous times in our industry, and for me, was part of my career, was the dot-com bust, 2000, 2001. The industry was booming, and then it fell off a cliff. 23 years later, I'm still skeptical when things look good in our industry. What did you learn from the experience, and how did you manage teams through that time?
So the dot-com bust, during that dot-com bust, of course, things we thought were growing to the sky, and we found very shortly thereafter they weren't forever. So we had to significantly shrink our workforce and our physical footprint. During that time, we were hell-bent, frankly, on becoming much better and stronger as the business recovered. So one of the guiding principles that I learned from that experience was, in quotes, you've probably heard this, never waste a good crisis. And that tenet has really stuck with me every time we see a market downturn. How do we make ourselves even stronger now for the next growth cycle? And we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit further during this conversation.
Yeah, for me, it was really a lesson in resilience. This was also the time of the emergence of fiber broadband and the beginnings of the Fiber Broadband Association. The industry needed an advocacy group to align what was then a very fragmented fiber broadband market. What do you think was really important at this time?
Well, I think we were a young and immature industry, and it really required industry collaboration, even with different priorities and as competitors. And so Corning, we were proud to help make that happen and proud of the partnership with FBA today. And Bob, really you should take a bow as one of the early founders of what was then called the Fiber to the Home Council in the US, which became the Fiber Broadband Association as we know it today. So Bob, thank you for your service in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of the proudest moments, I think, of the early part of my career. And even prouder with the incredible progress Gary has led in the last several years in driving membership, education, and importantly, advocacy. So thinking again at the downturn, it was really tough, but then there was light at the end of the tunnel. In 2003, the FCC deregulated broadband services over fiber. This provided regulatory certainty for the service providers and paved a way to scale fiber to the home deployments. What were the keys to success for this period?
Well, I think as everyone knows, we're pretty much known as inventors. That's the way a 173-year-old company like Corning that frankly invented the light bulb still stays relevant today. And our inventors back then looked to cable TV networks and thought, what if we could connect fibers like they connect coax cables? That's frankly where the inspiration came from, the hardened outside plant connector. And I think that was a sentinel moment for us. But from a leadership principle, let me share a little bit more about never waste a good crisis and what that means to us. First, we continue to invest, meaning make bets in the future, even during the worst of times. And, some industry players have shared with me personally, wow, we couldn't believe you came up with what you did in 2004, really, when Verizon started to heavily invest in fiber to the home for the first time. And if we hadn't been investing during the downturn and frankly the hardened outside plant connector, that never would have happened and we never would have been able to support Verizon the way we were. So that's the first thing. Secondly, having the right people in the right jobs to capitalize on the recovery. That's something we worked hard on during that period of time too. And then the last one, is authenticity. When people know they can trust you, it really makes a difference. It makes a difference when you're going through hard times with your own organization. And it also makes a difference when you're trying to collaborate with industry partners. So I think authenticity makes a real difference, not only as an individual, but to an organization.
Thanks, Mike. That's great. So let's move now to the present or near present. So COVID put a spotlight on the have and have-nots, and your passion for connecting the unconnected was front and center. You threw down the gauntlet, creating a disruptive rural team. Additionally, the pandemic brought new business challenges, most notably the supply-demand imbalance as carriers stockpiled inventory. A little bit about your passion for connecting the unconnected and some of the lessons from the pandemic.
Well, staying focused on connected the unconnected, access to broadband, I truly believe, means access to opportunity. And we saw it more during the pandemic than any other time. We all know that still today, only about 25% of Americans are connected with fiber broadband. So that, to me, tells me there's still 75% of the job left undone. And that's what we're passing on to this next generation of leaders and all of you as industry leaders to collaborate and make that happen. That's why I'm so excited, as Gary is, of what AT&T just announced, Verizon buying Frontier, and lots of other things we see happening all around us, as well as BEAD really getting underway in real life, as the first awards have been given to the state of Louisiana, and all 50 other states have actually gotten through the challenge process. So I'm super excited about all that. And the other thing that's just a fact is that communities with high-speed fiber broadband have about 30% higher GDP growth than those that don't. And who would think a garden spot in the US would be like Chattanooga, Tennessee? I love Chattanooga, Tennessee, by the way, but because of their historic investment in broadband as documented by the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, you can see the huge difference that progressive idea made in that community. And by the way, during COVID, there wasn't a single child in that entire community that didn't have high-speed broadband to do their lessons on. And that's just inspiration, I think, for all of us. The other thing I would say is being purpose-driven and helping others be purpose-driven as well is inspirational to me, I think, and has been something that's fueled me and fueled our organization's passion. And I think when our noble purpose directly correlates with our business purpose, people get it and they just want to make a difference in the world. And I just think that is just a great source of inspiration. Another key focus, other than just, let's get it done, has been workforce development. We know we got to have all the products and we got to have people ready to spend the money, but we got to have people that can actually install these networks. So there's hundreds of thousands of new workers needed to put these fiber networks into place. And that's one sort of bottleneck that we all have been thinking about and working towards. And I'd just like to shout out to Gary and FBA for their fiber design and installation course, which is making a big difference getting more of those installers and designers ready for the huge challenge of connecting the other 75% of Americans with fiber. And then finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the supply chain related cycle we're emerging from. And I think we've got a chart that we've shared with investors that's been fully vetted by all of our comms folks. I wanted to show you some other charts, which I wasn't authorized to do, but get that chart up. And I'll just talk a little bit about that and how that's been helpful for our point of view. Yeah, so this is it. And so what you see simply in this chart is the gray line is the fiber market trend line as a market that we've seen. And the blue, really jagged line is our own fiber volume that we've shipped as correlated with the fiber market trend line. And so I just say a couple of things about this. First, it's important, we found it extremely important to know the shape of the long-term fiber trend volume S-curve. And this is a little 10-year section of that really longer trend curve that we track like very intentionally all the time. And we know what it looked like in the past, and we have our point of view what it looks like in the future. But this section of that curve was really a foundation for our knowledge here. And then secondly, knowing exactly what our customers are putting in the ground was key to our confidence in what was happening during the 2023 demand correction when customers were using up the inventory that they had overbought during the supply constraints of 21 and 22. So we told the market confidently, yeah, you can see there's a 30% below trend line point that we had seen just a few quarters ago. And we knew for sure that we would make progress towards getting back on that long-term trend line in relatively short order. And you can see in quarter two for Corning, we were 18% below. And I think we shared with investors recently, we're 10% below now. It's like we are making really fast progress, and we're projecting we will in the industry, we get back onto this long-term trend line, by the early phases of next year. So that was, another lesson learned during this, the most recent, downturn that we saw.
Yeah. So for me, one of the lessons back on the rural subject was, we did dozens of interviews with service providers, and what we found was that those who were not flexible were severely challenged in trying to build to rural areas. The flexible service providers willing to change the processes, procedures, the way they do things were far more successful. So flexibility is key for these harder to reach places. All right, so continuing with things that are going on today, a topic of considerable interest is the emergence of AI. This is resulting in the need for data center interconnects, and which creates some associated power challenges and the need for remote data center sites. Talk a little bit about how this impacts the industry and how Corning's positioned itself for the moment.
Yeah, so we spent the last 5 years reinventing everything to meet the density requirements of AI. Density is one of the 4 main technology vectors, as we call them, that we're constantly focused on in developing solutions. And we've looked at every application, and it keeps coming back to these 4 things: denser, easier, cheaper, and greener. And every single solution that we try and invent, we make sure that we consider all those 4 aspects on. And when AI moment arrived, we were ready. So, a leadership lesson from that is really collaborating with the right players to capitalize on deep market understanding. And then in the case of AI, it meant collaborating with our customers and designing new solutions ahead of the need. And those solutions, this density, we are getting calls every week, it seems like, we're just running out of space. What can we do to get all the connections made so that we can build these massive, large learning models?
Okay. Now let's take the crystal ball out and tell us a little bit about the things you think will be shaping the industry in the years ahead.
Well, this is the most fun, especially since I'm retiring, so I can be like the oracle and then not have any accountability for the forecast. So maybe we can bring up a chart that the last chart that we had prepared for this talk. And I wanted to talk about a yardstick of how we predict sort of the future. And we call this our E to O, electrical to optical conversion chart. I think it's the next one, maybe. Here we go. And so when you look at this blue line on this chart, we've found that once a link exceeds 100 gigabit meters per second, that's just you multiply the data rate times the distance of that particular link. And when that number is greater than 100 gigabit meters per second, that link will naturally transition from electrical to optical. And it's simply because of the skin effect in copper conductors, as I'm sure we're all intimately familiar with. As data rate or frequency goes up, the energy on an electrical conductor goes to a thinner and thinner layer, which increases the resistance, which limits the distance. That's the reason why this physical limitation of copper exists, which doesn't exist in the optical domain, as we all know. So you can see that in submarine networks to start with and long-haul access 5G networks have all crossed over this line, and it's clearly more beneficial in any greenfield to use fiber every single time. And much of data centers have done the same thing in moving to optical. So what's yet to come? First of all, there's going to be even more fibers per link as we move to 1.6 terabits per second. It doesn't have to do with EDO, it just has to do with like economics. And we've found that it's just cheaper to put more fibers in than it is to use wavelengths in the data center model. And so we'll see even more fibers that way. Next, you get to a distance and data rate limitation between the top of the rack and the servers themselves, which will be happening over the next short period of time. And if you don't know, there are as many connections in that small space in the data center as there are in the rest of the data center combined. So it's a big deal for connectivity. And then the connections are going to move inside the server to the chip for the same exact E to O reasons that I mentioned earlier. One other application that I'll mention as we're going out here is horizontal spaces of buildings. Wi-Fi 7 enables up to 40 gigabits per second in buildings. And fiber's advantage starting at 1 gig, but significantly cost advantage at 10 gig and above. And so really what I would say from a lessons and leadership perspective, that thought leadership and perseverance is required to stay ahead of industry needs, and having the technical and economic models to predict when fiber will be needed has been critical to our success over all these years.
Super. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to turn it to Gary to pose questions, and we'll take it from there.
Well, we have a lot of good questions and comments from the audience. And first of all, just Mike, really appreciate everything you've done to really get our industry to where we're at. So just kind of pioneers like you that really we're standing on your shoulders. So thank you for that. And so another pioneer who's been in the industry for 38 years, he says over the years, the most significant improvements in fiber cable he witnessed was the introduction and widespread use of dry water block compounds, both in buffer tubes and within the inner jacket from the water blocking jelly. It really improved fiber splicing preparation in the field. What do you think is the most significant improvement in either fiber or the electronics using for fiber to the home?
Well, actually, I think that that's true. And we actually Corning had a project called Mojave when we were doing that, because of course, the Mojave Desert is very dry. And it took a long time to convince everyone to move in this direction, because originally there was too much powder put in and it would fall out on your shoes and you'd have gel on the ground. And so we worked really hard to make the gel-free cable be, as successful as it is now. I frankly think what we're going through right now is just as transformative with density. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen our announcement with Lumen. We have a need for more fiber in places that nobody ever thought about before. And that's why we've proposed, and we're moving towards 200 micron fibers with special properties. You've heard about Corning's contour fiber. Others have similar kinds of fibers. So if you have the fiber smaller and capable of taking more microband and macroband damage from cabling, then you can make the cables incredibly small so that you can fit more fiber in really unusual places. And in some cases, you can make the cable so small that you can store the slack storage in things like a flower pot closure in a fiber to the home run. So we're super excited about what density is going to do now and over the next 10 years.
Well, I tell you, when I see fiber being made from a preform to being, put in a draw tower, it's magic. And so, I mean, I can't describe anything other than magic. The fact that it just perfectly draws down to the right dimensions and so forth. So, talk about how so we have all this fiber in the ground, and now we're getting, thinner and thinner fiber. How is that possible? How are we going to be compatible with all the future the fiber that we've already deployed?
Well, the key for us right now is we haven't changed the size of the glass. So there's two things in compatibility: the outside dimension and the mode field diameter. And all the fibers we're introducing are fully backward compatible. So like if you strip the coating off of the fiber, the glass is exactly the same size, has exactly the same mode field diameter. So there'll be like virtually no change in splice loss. So everything that you can guarantee Corning as a fiber leader, we always take very seriously sustainability of the solution, backward compatibility, and the like. And so I think that's one of the things that's key to making sure that there is no difference, and there should be no difference in the fibers we're deploying in terms of backward compatibility.
So, one of the questions came in about the competitive landscape, and I know that at FBA we had a very serious effort underway with trusted fiber to make sure that gray market fiber and untrusted fiber didn't get into our market. We see a lot of dumping from China and others. Where do you see competition, and what should any words of wisdom here to make sure that we get trusted fiber in our network?
Well, I think you're wise in what you've said, Gary, and we've both been advocates for fiber being, part of the industrial base in the U.S. And for all the BABA requirements that have been implemented to make sure that when U.S. taxpayer dollars are being used to build out to people that can't be connected or probably won't be connected otherwise, that ought to be done with a trusted source of fiber from reliable sources. And so we'll continue to advocate for that. We're advocating for similar things in other markets in the world, as you would imagine. Europe is one that we've done a lot of work in and will continue to do a lot of work in. And it's just something we have to be ever diligent for. Unfortunately, we can all look at the IP of some of our competitors, how fiber can be used in ways that we would never hope that would be used. And so I think it's just really important as an industry group to continue to safeguard that fiber is what it said it's purported to be. There are no backdoors or hacking or or darkening or anything else that could be done with some of the fibers that have been invented over the years. And I think that's one of the sort of things that we have to do as industry partners.
Well, Mike, I've always enjoyed our discussions. I always learn so much from you and your colleagues. You have an amazing executive team. So I want to turn it back over to Bob, because I think Bob has some things he wants to say before we close out.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Mike, I'm really pleased to state that your passion for bringing fiber broadband to everybody has inspired Corning to sponsor the annual Connect the Unconnected Award. And the award will be presented to an individual who's demonstrated leadership in bringing fiber broadband to the hardest to reach or the most remote areas and making service available to every home in the community. Gary?
And I just want to add, Mike, that we are this whole award is honoring your legacy, and we can't think of anybody better than to present the first award at our Fiber Connect conference in Nashville in June as Mike Bell. So we hope that you can pull some time away from your busy schedule in June and come and.
Oh, hell yes. Yeah, you didn't even, yeah, I didn't even know this was coming. So like you won't be able to get rid of me after that. So yeah, I would love nothing better than to enjoy some country music and to really honor someone that's really making a difference in connecting the unconnected. I can't explain or express in words how meaningful this is and how meaningful it would be for me to shake the hands of somebody that's making a difference in people's lives.
So, Mike, I want to give you the opportunity to give some parting words to our industry.
I'd just say keep going. I mean, you are in an industry that truly makes a difference in the world, in people's lives. And since this is the Fiber Broadband Association for the U.S. and ourselves as a country, you are providing critical infrastructure for the future of the world. So just keep going and do that. I mean, we still got 75% of the way to go. So let's connect every darn home in America with fiber over the next decade. And it's a fun and exciting challenge ahead.
Absolutely.
Again, this has been a treat for me to hear from you and Bob. And again, Mike, we wish you the best in your retirement, although I don't think that's a word that fits you. So your next endeavors. And I also hope everybody can join us next Wednesday. We're going to get together with industry pundit and luminary Blair Levin, the former chief of staff for FCC Chairman Reed Hundt, the author of the FCC's National Broadband Plan, and currently he's the U.S. Policy and Regulation Advisor for New Street Research for a special fireside chat, the ACP fallout and broadband priorities in the new administrations. You're not going to want to miss that. If you know Blair, you know that has no shortage of opinions, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Again, Mike, congratulations on a very fantastic career. We all are in debt to everything that you've done, and we'll be standing on your shoulders here as we move into the future.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.